Hello. How is everybody doing today? Hopefully everyone's doing well and having a good Tuesday. So I have something really funny and somewhat embarrassing to share, but as those of you who know me well, you know I'm not afraid to share the embarrassing stuff. So I had my time personally scheduled wrong, and I did, let's just call it a practice run at 3 o'clock. So based on that, you may get out early because it did not take a full 30 minutes to run through my program today. Oh my goodness. But here we are again. So, thank you so much for tuning in if you're here. I'll be honest, it is near impossible for me to know who is tuning in through this system that I use. And the reason I use it is so that it pulls chats or comments from both YouTube and LinkedIn and lets me see them from both systems. So don't be afraid to share your chats. That's how I know that you're here. So throw something in there. I'd love to hear from you, and I am super excited to be here. The reason I decided to do this is, well, a couple of reasons. Mainly because I've been really struggling to feel connected to a lot of the people that I want to connect with, people like you. And I've tried social media, I will keep trying, but I'll be honest, it just does not feel that easy to me. It doesn't feel authentic. And so I figured, what the hell, let's give this a try and see if this feels better. And so here we are. Here we are giving it a shot. And to start today off, which we are going to talk about community and how it fuels resilience. But I want to start off with a question. So, when was the last time that you truly felt supported? I mean, like the kind of support that lifts you up even when you don't realize that you need it. When was the last time you felt connection? The role of connection in resilience, the role of community, and why both of those matter so much is really what we're going to focus on today. So, drop a word in the chat, if you would please, to describe what community means to you. And while you do that, I am going to share a little story about kind of what came up for me when I started planning today's topic. So in January of 2022, I started through therapy to uncover a pretty traumatic memory, and I was going through what's called EMDR therapy. Uh, the anguish that came up through that process was pretty excruciating. I had been prepared for what to expect with the EMDR therapy. I'd even done a practice run with something that wasn't quite so traumatic, but it still had its moments where I was surprised about what the after effects, or like what I like to call the aftershocks of EMD therapy, were. I mean, in hindsight, they're fascinating, but in the moment, they were just plain scary. I remember one night I woke up in the middle of the house standing, and my husband was holding me. And apparently, I had been in my sleep running through the house screaming bloody murder. I think I scared the shit out of both of us, but there were instances like that. There was a lot of rewiring that my brain and my neurons and everything had to do while I was going through that process. I mean, the pain alone of like digging up bones for something like that is enough in itself. And I could have easily isolated in that moment. I could have just retreated and closed up shop until I had figured it out. But my community didn't let me do that. They were there. They were there through thick and thin. My husband was there to sometimes literally catch me on more than one occasion. And my friends were there. They were there not just to listen when I reached out, but to pull the gunk out of me when I needed it, as much as I was willing to share, to sit in silence with me. And the important part was that they reached out to me to just check in. therapist who had become a part of my community was also there. She was checking in between appointments. And I mean, it took a village. It took people, and my community helped me to be resilient in one of the darkest moments of my adult life. And that experience taught me something so powerful. It taught me that resilience is not built in isolation. It is built through the people around us. And today, that's what I want to explore. I want to explore why that happens and how we can all create more of those moments together. So I want you to think of a time when someone showed up for you when you needed it the most. And just drop a quick sentence in the chat again so that it lets me know you're here and I don't feel like I'm speaking into the void. And while you do that, by the way, hi Sarah, thank you for sending in a chat. I appreciate it. So let's talk about science. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I struggle with science. I always have. Not my favorite subject. It did not come easy. But I do want to talk about the heart of connection and a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is why humans are wired for connection. There's a few reasons here. There's a few studies, but there are 4 in particular that I'd love to talk about today with you guys. The first one is that as humans, we are hardwired for bonding. We are social creatures, y'all. Our brains are actually wired to seek connection because historically, our survival depended on it. The next thing that, if you look this up, is kind of interesting. It's called the oxytocin effect. So basically, when we connect with other people, our brains release what's called oxytocin. And sometimes that's even called the bonding hormone, which I thought was kind of cool. It basically fosters trust, and fun fact, it lowers stress. It reduces our stress, which is a great health benefit. The next thing that I thought was interesting that helped to explain why humans are wired for connection is what's called mirror neurons. I'd never heard of these before, but mirror neurons are what allow us to feel what others feel. That's what helps us to empathize and build deeper relationships. So I liked this example. It gave it a little bit of, I don't know, something tangible. So have you ever been in a room and someone yawns and then you just immediately yawn? You probably just yawned because I said the word yawn. I'm just going to say it again, yawn. That's mirror neurons at work, okay? So that gives you an example of what that is and how they work without getting too sciencey. And then finally, there's research that shows that social rejection and or isolation activates the same brain regions as physical pain. So that's why disconnection can literally hurt. That's why, like, when you feel connected to someone and you get pulled away from them, it can cause physical pain. So what happens when we lack connection? Well, we can get anxious, we can become depressed. It actually increases those effects. Chronic loneliness has been linked to higher rates of depression and anxiety. And this is terrifying, but there are studies that show that loneliness is similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of health impact. Yikes. It can shorten your lifespan, folks. These studies are showing that loneliness is actually a stronger predictor of early death than obesity and air pollution. And speaking of pollution, there's brain fog. There's lower resilience because without those meaningful interactions we have by connecting with each other, our brain functions, our cognitive functions, our emotional well-being all are affected. They decline. I mean, have you ever noticed when you have put your head in the sand or closed yourself off that small problems can feel even bigger, maybe even overwhelming? And then finally, well, let's go back to social media for a minute. I know I talked about how I struggle with it, but it's an illusion of connection. Social media gives the appearance of connection, but it really does lack the depth of real, in-person, and deeply engaged relationships. And quite honestly, it cannot mimic the same feeling, the emotional energy sharing, all that stuff that you get when you're in person with someone. It's kind of like fast food. It might feel good in the moment, but it's just not nourishing most of the time. And you're probably going to wake up the next day or an hour later or however long after your social media spin out and not feel all that great. So let's talk about how those in-person connections, that community, can help us bounce back even faster, because that's the important part. It is a stress buffer. I mean, people with strong social networks, they just handle stress better and they have lower cortisol levels. There's, using me as an example, there's post-traumatic growth. It's not just me, survivors who have had a traumatic event often talk about how community was the key factor in their healing process. And that's because we don't heal in isolation. We heal in connection. We heal when we shine a light on things. I'm sure you've heard it before, but things can't stay dark when you shine a flashlight on them. And that shining a light on something is as simple as talking about it. And so finding those connections, that smaller community, that smaller circle of people that you trust to talk about those things will help you heal. And it's contagious. I mean, just like stress can be contagious, so is resilience. I mean, being around supportive and positive people helps us to reframe the challenges that we're facing. It helps us to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and keep moving forward, because it is contagious. And when we feel supported, we feel like we're not doing it all on our own, and we have the power to keep moving forward. It also allows us the power of perspective. When we talk about the shit that's real, when we talk about our struggles, we're allowed an opportunity to shift our perspective, to shift our outlook, because we're actually getting information back. We're not just sitting in a spiral of our own thoughts. It might even help us see solutions that we would not have otherwise seen. So these are all really important ways that we can stay connected, or what community can do to help us. So what's one thing that you can do to stay connected? Whether it is a weekly call or a group chat or coffee or anything, a turned up Tuesday, something like that, go ahead and share that in the chat. I want you to think through it. What's one way that you can stay connected? And while you do that, let's talk about some tips on how to reach out, how to cultivate resiliency through community. I'm only going to share 3. The first tip is being the first to reach out. Don't wait for someone else to pick up the phone and call you. Don't be the person that says, well, they don't call me. You are the first. You are the leader in this effort. So you're the person that makes it happen, because we often think that connection just naturally happens. It does not. It only thrives when we take intentional action. And one small way that I like to do this, that I just had the privilege of doing, is I send out Valentine's Day cards to the women in my life. And I just like to send a handwritten note that says, I'm thinking about you and I think you're special and you're amazing and here's why. Little notes to these amazing women in my life to remind them how valued they are. And it's not just the holiday itself, it's really about taking that moment to say, hey, you matter. So imagine if we all did something like that, something just small that can make a big impact. It's not just on special occasions, but using it as a regular practice too. And Lisa just said, Turned Up Tuesday. I love it. So here's a challenge for you. Okay, I want you to, this is going to be the first thing that pops in your head. Who is one person that you can reach out to today and say, hey, I appreciate you? Do you have it? All right. I know this goes against conventional thinking, but I want you to pick up your phone really quick. Take 10 seconds and shoot them a text that literally just says, hey, thinking about you and I appreciate you. Ready, set, go. While you do that, I'm going to keep talking because I want to go to tip number 2. It's all about consistency. All right, that's a secret. We assume that strong relationships are built on these big, meaningful moments, but that is so not true. They're built in the small, repeated actions. It's checking in, it's sending a meme, I love cat videos, it's making the phone call. Yes, there is science behind the voice and its imprint and how hearing someone's voice can completely change your day. So please get over the I don't talk on the phone and just make the phone call. It's extending an invite even when life is busy. When we show up, even in these really simple ways, we build trust and we create a sense of safety in relationships. Think about it. How many of your friendships have faded? Not because of a fight, but because life got in the way. So what is one relationship in your life that could benefit just a little more from consistency? And take a minute to think about that. And let's move on to tip number 3. Let's talk about how we find or even build our circles of support. This one's been a journey for me. I think it has been for most of us. When I was in my 20s, it was easy. I'd go to work. I was either a waitress most of the time or I worked in retail sometimes. Anyway, I made friends at work because we'd hang out at work and then we'd go out after work or we'd meet up to do hiking or whatever. And just like that, I had a community. It was so easy. And then in my 30s, it was still kind of easy. I'd go to the office and I'd make friends, rinse and repeat, basically. But then things did start to shift. People got married, they had kids, they moved away. By the time I hit my 40s, well, the pandemic hit. There's that. That changed everything. And my husband and I moved to Colorado, where we only knew a couple of people. And suddenly I was in totally uncharted territory. How do you build a community as an adult post-pandemic in a world where people are working remotely? Social habits have changed, and all those ways, all those old ways that we used to naturally connect feel just weird, disrupted. But I'm going to challenge that. We have no problem going to concerts or coffee shops or restaurants. It's when it comes to gathering in deeper, more intentional ways, whether that's in workplaces, with teams or work teams, and faith groups or local meetups, associations, networking, book clubs, women's or men's groups. It's in those ways that there seems to be a barrier. And I know I've felt it. And I know that I'm not alone. So why is that? what the hell is going on with that? I mean, is it fear of being vulnerable again? Of building something meaningful only to have it taken away like we experienced with the pandemic? Is it resistance to giving up the independence that we found, our ability to work from anywhere, our own routines, how we redefined life balance and what that looks like? Or is it something else totally? They're all valid fears. But I have to ask, what are we sacrificing by feeding them? What if the one thing that we're avoiding, the messiness of deep, real human connection, is the very thing that can help us thrive again? So here's a challenge. What is one space in your life, your workplace, your team, your family, your church, maybe it's a group or an organization that you used to be part of? What's one space in your life that you used to be a part of that you drifted away from for whatever reason, but you miss it deeply? And what is one action that you can take this week to just step back in, maybe put a toe in, just a little? Please drop that in the chat now. There are so many reasons why we can make excuses to not make them. There are barriers to connection. You're not crazy. There's social anxiety. I know even I suffer from that sometimes. I walk into a room of people I don't know and my hands start sweating. It's uncomfortable. What if I say something wrong or I giggle at the wrong thing? It's a real thing, but the digital fatigue is a real thing. That's another thing. I have friends everywhere, and we have coffee talks or happy hours virtually, but sometimes there's just digital fatigue. And then often there's just a fear of rejection. You know, that's a real fear. What if I'm not liked? What if I say the wrong thing? All those what ifs get in the way. We have to push through. That's on us to do. And honestly, I think all it takes is a mindset shift. Because if we can reframe it in our minds that connection is not about perfection, it's about presence, then maybe it can make it a little easier. And who the hell wants Little Miss Perfect or Little Mr. Perfect in the room anyway? It's harder to relate to someone who's just absolutely perfect. So show up as your perfectly imperfect self. In fact, let's coin that right now. The next time that you're feeling scared or resistant to getting out there and reconnecting, to going back in and showing up, let's pull this out of our coin purse. Perfectly imperfect. Write it down on a Post-it note, put it on your keyboard, put it on your monitor, put it somewhere where you'll see it. And in fact, in the chat, if you would, right now, I want you to write, this week, I'm going to be perfectly imperfect. I'm giving you permission right now. I'm giving us all permission, me too, to be perfectly imperfect. Because resilience is not about figuring it all out, or certainly not about figuring it out alone. It is about letting people in. I mean, when I was at my lowest, my community did not wait for me to reach out. They showed up. They showed up again and again and again. And that is the power of connection. And here's the thing, it does not have to be huge or an overwhelming step. Those connections just start small. Reach out to one friend. Show up for one gathering. Re-engage with the spaces. Re-engage with the people that once felt like home. So if you're feeling disconnected, ask yourself, what is one small step that I can take this week to lean back into community. Because resilience is not built in isolation, it is built together. So, I told you that today would probably be 30 minutes or less. I really do hope that in this little snippet of time you've found some oomph, some inspiration, something to help you pick yourself up by the bootstraps and keep moving forward. And if it resonated with you, I would love to continue the journey with you. You can find me online. And you probably found me on LinkedIn or on some social channel, but my website is up. It's pretty simple. It's just balancewithbrandy.com. I also have a book. Oh, I will share the QR code with you guys. If you're a reader, not everybody's a reader, but this is an easy read, and I would be remiss if I didn't share it with you. So there's that. Yeah, I would love to connect with you. I have a newsletter too. You can actually find that on my site as well. It's free, it's monthly. I try to send it out regularly, about the same time each month. Sometimes I'm better than others. I'm perfectly imperfect. And also, if you enjoyed today, mark your calendars. Looks like we had a few people join, so we'll be back next month. I will be shooting for March 18th, which is also a Tuesday. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for doing everything you're doing to move our collective experience forward in a positive way. Yeah. So enjoy it. Have a good week, and I will see you soon.